What's up, Hayden? What's up, Chuck? Nice to see you guys. Thanks for thanks for bearing with us while we set up the live. And I think we'll be able to kick it off in just a few minutes here. Do you want to share your screen, Leanne?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. All right, everyone. So we have a really exciting event today with Hygrozyme, and they will be exploring the complex world of IPM with us. And so, Leanne, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about just introducing the event and who's with us today, just before we get started. That
Yeah.
would be awesome. And I'll be here fielding any questions. So if you have any questions or want to stop the presentation to ask something on slides, this presentation is going to be jam packed today. Feel free to put it in the chat, and then I will be moderating the chat to raise stuff to our presenters today. But other than that, Leanne, I'll pass it over to you and let you get started here.
Sounds good. Thanks so much. Hello, everybody. For those who have joined, thanks so much for joining us today. For anyone who doesn't know, we are Hygrozyme. We're a manufacturer out of Canada of crop enhancement, nutrient, and protection products. And you can see the logos of all our different products that we have out right now on the screen. So we have Hygrozyme, Hygrozyme Concentrate, HygroBend, HydroPunch, HyClean, and HyShield. And we'll be digging into some of them a little bit later on in the presentation, but the overall purpose of today's presentation is going to be focused on IPM. I myself my name is Leanne. I'm the product specialist for Hygrozyme, and this is our director of R&D, PhD Dr. Doug Chou, who will be helping me kind of walk through a bunch of different items and topics around IPM so we can all learn a little bit more about it and hopefully come away armed with some more knowledge, because knowledge is power. Do you want me to go ahead and keep going, Matt, or are we waiting for a few more to join?
Keep going. Let's kick it off.
All right. So yeah, this is our little agenda here today. It looks daunting, but I promise you it will go fast. So without further ado, I'll just jump into it. So there's a few different types of controls when we talk about IPM. And of course, when we talk about IPM, it's integrated pest management. And normally IPM systems involve some combination of these controls. So the first one is a biologic control, something living that is performing some kind of a pest management task. So typically this comes in the form of natural enemies for pests that might be affecting your plants. A lot of the times, ladybugs are very common in this, parasitic wasps. There's a ton of other options as well, and there's a lot of companies out there that specialize in providing biologic IPM options. And then we get into our chemical controls, and chemical controls can be split up into a variety of different categories, the first being organic. So when we say organic, obviously we're talking about something that is naturally derived without too much of human intervention. So these are things like essential oils and anything that's derived from the earth that can be used to combat those pests. There's also near organic, which is a natural material that involves some kind of human synthesization. This can be diatomaceous earth, some biopesticides, and a couple different methods that you can use there where, like I said, there is some human synthesization involved of the materials, but overall it comes from a natural source. And lastly, we get into synthetic chemicals. So these are man-made chemicals that would be produced in a lab. And a lot of the time there's a connotation around synthetic that, chemicals equals bad. And that's not necessarily the case. Some synthetic chemicals are extremely effective, especially when we're talking about IPM, and often they're a lot more targeted as well. So synthetic controls tend to be targeted towards a specific pest, maybe even a specific life cycle of that pest, and specific environments as well. And a lot of the times in facilities that are using some kind of an IPM system, they'll use a combination of a couple, or if not all of these different options. Okay, so what are the advantages of having some kind of an integrated pest management system? By using multiple different types of controls, you can reduce your reliance on chemical pesticides in food production systems. So not all chemical pesticides are bad, but often when we're talking about like food crops or cannabis, where it's something that's going to be consumed, a lot of the times the public has some trepidation around consuming those chemicals. So by using some kind of combination, you can reduce that reliance on those synthetic materials. And also by using a combination of different controls, you can often slow the development of resistance to pesticides. So I think Doug will get into that a little bit more later, but basically if you're consistently using the same mode of action and the same pesticide or synthetic product, or really any type of one specific pesticide, over time, those pests are going to develop a resistance to that level of control or that specific mode of action. And then, they'll stop dying off and their populations will increase. And then you start right at the beginning with your problems all over again. So by using different combinations and switching up your controls, you can lengthen that process and slow down that development of resistance. Another advantage is that long-term sustainability. So again, when you're switching up different methods and you're using all kinds of different controls, it's a lot more sustainable. It can be more cost-effective as well. It can be more environmentally sustainable. And you develop this kind of long-term plan that bounces around between different controls, which can be very beneficial to your system, as well as maintaining a balanced ecosystem. Anytime we're using pesticides, even the biological and organic ones, we want to be careful of the effect that they're having on the environment. So using kind of a combo effect can be very beneficial in that regard as well. As I kind of mentioned, increased efficacy as well, and better cost versus value margin. Switching up your controls and your methods can also often deliver a much better result. A lot of people do like stress training and things like that. So the more different things that you're introducing, it kind of shocks the plant a little bit. Sometimes the plant itself, as well as the pests, kind of develop a resistance, and they know what's being introduced to them, so they'll kind of stop reacting as much. So when we switch up our controls, we can avoid that effect as well.
Hey, Leanne, just a quick pause. Can you just refresh your screen really quickly? Because I think your screen is frozen. I want to make sure that okay. There we go. That's good. Things are moving now.
Is it good?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Yeah, as well as, so lastly, the last advantage that I'll cover is just raising awareness of the different options that are out there. We don't need to rely on one specific synthetic option anymore, and we can reestablish that bond with nature by using more organic and biological controls as well. And then I'll pass it over to Doug to discuss some disadvantages.
Thanks, Leanne. While Leanne mentioned, there are many advantages to IPM, there are some potential disadvantages that you should consider before you get into it, right? So shown here, and some of the disadvantages, for example, there's more involvement in the technicality of this method. So what that means is that, an individual, you should be aware of what's involved in the method, educate yourself about the options, because different pests and growing conditions may require different techniques, right? So, a successful application of this method is always a learning process. So you have to be flexible and willing, and the willingness to learn new information, and also adapt and willing to change quickly as well too. So that's important, right? And you need time and resource to develop the strategy. Implementing an IPM program does require a significant time and resource at the beginning when you learn about the methods. This techniques involves develop individual plants, identification of pests and their biology, right? Selection of different control methods, and monitor and evaluation of programs, see what works and what doesn't work. And also requires close monitoring as well too, right? It takes time to monitor. The practice IPM has different methods integrated in order to provide the most effective pest control. Different methods, different pests has different control methods, and it's necessary to monitor which method works best for which pest, right? So it's constantly evaluating and change and evaluating. And another disadvantage is that there are some limited effectiveness. What that means is that in some cases, IPM may not be as effective as traditional pests because particularly in challenging pests, as well as the pest might be, the pressure might be too hard. And in those situations, you might have to go using synthetic. As Leanne mentioned, there are some really good synthetic product out there, and you just have to use it, adhere to that product label, right? And another disadvantage you might want to consider is the availability of non-control methods. What that means is that those biologic pests that Leanne mentioned, it might not be available in certain regions and whatnot, right? And so you want to take that into consideration. And lastly, it's just that some member of the public out there in general, they have a lack of understanding of what IPM is, and so this can lead to kind of skepticisms and resistance to implement the programs. Yeah, so what I will take you through the next is different type of pests out there. In general, there are two common. One is the chewing insects. So these actually has a chewing mouth parts, right? So they can actually do damage to the plant tissue. Essentially, you can see some of them actually chew on the leaf. You can see holes.
Sorry, can I just interrupt? Can we please change the slide to the type of pest slide, please? On our side, we're just seeing the advantages of integrated pest management.
Maybe I have to go back.
Fix that here. Apologies, everybody. Give me one quick moment.
Just a little technical error. It's okay. It's going great so far.
Thank you so much. All right.
We also have a question that Sergio, I saw your question here. We're going to save that until the end. So I think it will work really well in the next section.
How are we now, Matt?
Great. This looks awesome.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt. So let me pick up where I left off. So as I was saying, two type of general pests: the chewing insects, which actually has a mouth part, scissor-like jar that can basically cut the plant tissues. You can actually see some pests that actually chew hole through the leaf and things like that, right? So example, these are cockroach, grasshopper, beetles, wasps, and then the other ones are the second insects, right? So these have a second mouth parts. Several specialized subtypes have evolved, including the sponging, lapping structure in flies and siphoning structure in moth and butterflies. Most of the greenhouse pests are the second pests. And examples such as leafhopper, white flies, aphids, and so forth. And these ones can actually deposit their salivas on a certain area on the plants, as well as sucking the fluid from the leaf or as well too. And what are some of in the next slide, I kind of will go through some of the damages that cause, and I'm going to talk mainly about the second pest, right? So the direct damage caused by these are, they really kind of mechanical damage and the reduction in the carbohydrates, proteins, and nutrients available to the plants at the cellular level. So you can see plants, some of the symptoms that you'll see are plant stunting, wilting, leaf discoloration, leaf yellowing, and leaf curling. And some of the indirect damages are secondary infections by fungal pathogens such as black sooting mold that colonize the waste excluded by insects. So some of the things that are excluded by insect, you actually see mold formation. And then also some of these sucking pierce insects act as like fantastic vectors for transferring whether it's fungals or viruses, right? And some of them are listed on the slide here, but another very common ones that there's evidence now in the literature that hop latent viruses, obviously, which is affecting this industry a lot, it's also can be transmitted by these insects, such as aphids.
Yeah, because once they pierce that cell wall, right? They're bringing everything.
They bring everything. You know, let's say they go to a plant that's infected with this virus, and then they suddenly fly to somewhere else, to another room where you have healthy plants. They can infect that plants there. So as Leanne mentioned earlier, you know, there are different modes of actions for pesticides. I'm just going to briefly touch on the fungicides and insecticides, right? So there are actually organizations, committees that determines the different classes or different modes of action of, say, fungicide as well as insecticide. And there's a website there. You can go there and get a lot more detailed information. But basically, the fungicides are assigned to different groups based on their mode of action by a letter with the added number, right? And so it's very important when you have a product, whether it's synthetic or biologic, to read the label, right? Because the label will generally indicate your application dosage, application interval, how many applications you can apply in a growth cycle, you know, and that helps really to kind of, as Leanne mentioned earlier, to help to come down, reduce the risk of resistance, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to use an IPM approach. I'll just give you an example here. For example, you might have a fungicide A that you can apply, you can use for 3 applications per growth cycle. You cannot use it on a consecutive application. Most synthetic products are like that. And in between application, you must use a different fungicide with a different mode of action. So as Leanne mentioned earlier, you can't use the same fungicide over and over again, because if you do, the pests or the pathogens will quickly develop resistance over time. And then I'm not going to go through the detail that with the insecticide, but it's the same logic, right? So there's a different committee. It's called the Insecticide Resistant Action Committee. They determine all the commercial insecticide, which mode of action they have and which group they have, and they're assigned by letter as well as added number. And lastly, what I'll mention is Leanne mentioned about the different type of pesticide. One is synthetic. The other one she mentioned is kind of the organic, or what we like call biopesticide. Mm-hmm. So biopesticide is very unique in a sense that it generally has multiple of actions, right? So it usually has multiple modes of action, so it's less resistant to, so it's less likely to develop resistance over time, or much more slower than a synthetic counterpart.
I don't know if you have already, Doug, but when you say mode of action, can you give us just like one example of what one mode of action might be?
Yeah, so for example, I'll give you for example, in biopesticide, a lot of the biopesticide or one class of biopesticide is an oil type, right? Essential oil. So the oil itself will have a physical, a physical mode of action. That itself is one mode of action. But within a lot of the essential oil, there are actually organic compound in there, and those have different mode of action. For example, you can have one that's a cell membrane disruptor and things like that. Yeah.
Very interesting. Thanks, Doug. Okay. So we talked a lot about pests and how to combat them and the different options that are around. But where do they come from and how do they get in? Primarily, we're talking about greenhouses here. Indoor facilities are typically a little bit easier to control. There's normally only 1 or 2 ways that pests can get in, and outdoor, obviously, it's the wild, wild west, and they're there already. So specifically for greenhouses, it can be a lot harder to control because sometimes, especially in retrofitted buildings, they're not sealed as well. There's a lot of different points of entry. So new plants and cuttings is one. Heavily recommend using a very trusted supplier when you're bringing in new cuttings and clones from outside of your facility, and definitely isolating them or treating them if at all possible to avoid them bringing in anything new with them when they're introduced to the rest of your plants. The growing media itself is another one. I've seen this myself in my experience multiple times. Thrips can lay eggs, and other pests as well can lay eggs actually within the growing media a lot of the time before it even arrives at your facility. It's happening somewhere within the shipping process. This is really common in coco coir, as well as soil. I've seen it in rock wool as well, more rarely, but it does happen. So wherever possible, again, make sure that you're sanitizing that grow media, or at the very least kind of scouting it when you're unpacking, looking for signs of those things. Weeds. A lot of the time, in my experience, when you're at a greenhouse, there are typically weeds around the edges. They might be inside the facility, they might be outside. But a lot of the time, the pests that are coming in aren't specialized to one crop. They don't only feed on cannabis or only feed on tomatoes. A lot of the time, they're very generalized, and they will feed on whatever is there in large quantities. So yeah, if you have weeds, somewhere around your facility, make sure that you're treating those and taking a look at those as a possible vector point as well. And standing puddles of water as well. Any standing water is always going to be an attractor of pests. So yeah, just knowing your facility and knowing where your vector points and entry points are, so that you can be as mindful of those as possible. Overwintering populations as well. This can be a big one for greenhouses because a lot of the times they're very large spaces, and there's lots of spaces for things to hide. Vents are a big one, untreated corners, things like that. If you have any overhead trellising, those kinds of things. Some species of insects, and spider mites is a good example of this, will lay eggs that can survive between growing seasons. So you might have a situation where you've had a spider mite outbreak, you've treated that outbreak, it seems like it's gone, and then a season or two later, all of a sudden it's back and you're wondering where that came from. And it could be a result of this overwintering population that you weren't aware of prior. So just making sure that between your cycles, you're giving like a good deep clean. And again, like just an awareness of those tricky spots where pests might be hiding. And lastly, multiple generations. So a little bit similar to the previous point, but like I mentioned earlier, sometimes when you're using very targeted controls for your pest control, it will target a specific life cycle of the pest, or a specific life stage. So sometimes when you're treating, you might be treating the adult population, but that specific pesticide or biopesticide or whatever it is that you're using is only going to target the adult life stage of that pest. And it might not necessarily target the eggs or target the larvae that might be in your media or in your leaves or those kinds of things. So that's why it's really important, again, just to know what you're using and, do your research on the different controls and what actual life stage they're treating. And that's where, a combo approach comes in, where you might need a few different controls to attack all of the life stages of that pest. I'm going to pass it back to Doug here and talk about some environmental concerns. But before I move any further, do we have any questions or anything coming up, Matt?
We do have a few questions. They are related to your product specifically.
Okay.
So I wanted to save them for the product section. I thought that would make the most sense. I mean, we can start with those once we get there, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're almost there. So
perfect.
Keep on trucking.
Thanks, Leanne. So, obviously there's lots of pesticides used, both indoor and outdoor, and 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 they do have its places, but they do also can potentially cause some environmental damages. So I want to kind of give you a little bit overview, when you apply to the pesticide, what happened to them, in terms of environmental fate. So there are really two main process category affect what happened to pesticide in the environment. One is the transfer process. So that involves things like the absorption, the binding of the pesticide to soil particles or to other medias. And another one is volatilization. So some of the active ingredient or solid may be converted into a gas, right? So which then obviously can move away from your application area. And then there's also spray drift. So meaning obviously this is more particular for outdoor situation. If you apply, it can actually spray or drift to a different area. So that could have a detrimental effect on your, say, your neighbor's area or your plants, right? And then there's obviously runoff, right? If you apply and there's a waterway, it can run off and it can affect aquatic life and things like that. And the other process is the degradation process, right? So, a lot of them will get breakdown, especially in the outdoor, by microbial, right? Breakdown. There's a lot of microbial obviously in the soils and whatnot, and there's a chemical breakdown, right? So it's pesticide just by chemical reactions, with the soils as well. And there's obviously been outdoor in these particular cases are mostly for outdoors. You have photo degradation, right? The sun, it's going to degrade them as well too. So some of the degraded metabolites or compounds could also have harmful effect on the environment as well too. So that's why IPM is very important, because it kind of takes in different methods as an approach that you can reduce some of the synthetic pesticides out there.
Thank you, Doug. I think this is my last one before we jump into the product. I know there's some questions there already, which is awesome. So if you don't have one already, I'm assuming most of the people watching this do have some type of IPM system in place, but just in case, just a little step-by-step guide on kind of how to begin the process of developing that system. So first, right off the bat, you're going to want to kind of make a plan and figure out how to manage the prevention of those insects and plant diseases. And this is going to depend a little bit on, your facility, your region, where you're located, what pests are prevalent there. We might be getting some different pests here in BC, Canada, than someone is in California or on the East Coast. Second is identify the pests and their natural enemies and the damage that they can do. So like we talked about earlier, those biologicals, those natural enemies that can be introduced, you can always talk to an IPM provider. There's a lot of companies that provide those biologicals that can help you figure out what a natural enemy is to whichever problem it is that you're having. And then once you have those two things in place, you're going to want to monitor the populations, the pest damage and environmental conditions, so that you can try and isolate that as much as possible. The worst thing that can happen is if you have one room affected and then slowly it starts to leak out and affect all of your other rooms as well. So you want to make sure that you're isolating that problem and taking care of it as quickly as possible to avoid the spread. Which leads to making some very important control decisions, basically what we've been talking about this whole time, picking your control or your combination of control based on the potential damage that could arise, the cost and value of your production. Is it worth it to try and save that room, or do you just destroy, clean, sanitize, and start again? The impact on potential other pests and the beneficial organisms, and your environment. And then after that point, you'll use your strategies for behavioral, biological, chemical, cultural, mechanical methods to reduce that pest population. So we've talked a lot about those throughout this presentation. Obviously, again, it depends on your facility and your costs and all of these things as to what those controls will be. We just wanted to kind of elaborate and let people know what the options are that are out there. And then once you have everything implemented, evaluate the efficacy of those management decisions. And then really there should be another arrow leading right back up to the beginning, because as I'm sure we all know, it's an ongoing problem. We're never, unfortunately, up until this point, we're never going to completely get rid of pests and never have any ever again. So it's constantly scouting, constantly keeping an eye out for signs and knowing what those trigger points are and things of that nature so that you can keep your facility running as smoothly as possible. Last but not least, we have arrived at the long-awaited Hygro Punch. So for those who don't know, we have launched our own biological IPM called Hygro Punch just at the beginning of July into the US. We're very, very excited about this product. We've seen some really great results in our third-party lab testing that Doug will be digging into in just a minute here. But first, what is this product? It is an OMRI certified broad spectrum IPM as a contact insecticide, miticide, and fungicide. The active ingredients of Hygro Punch are cinnamon oil, thyme oil, and what was that last one, Doug? Soybean oil. Yes, so it is OMRI organic certified and all natural. And like Doug had mentioned earlier, each of those oils have their own mode of action. So there's multiple modes of action happening within this product that help to prevent that resistance for pests. And it can be used to treat spider mites, aphids, and diseases such as powdery mildew. We've also seen some good results for thrips and other pests and diseases as well. And it can be used, we've done testing on ornamentals, vegetables, flowering plants like cannabis, and in facilities, indoor, greenhouse, outdoor, basically all around, all different types of crops and all different types of applications. It is a foliar product, and there's a few different dosage ratings depending on the level of infestation as well. I think we're going to open it up for some questions. I know there's some waiting.
There's some.
Absolutely. So I have a few questions. I guess I'll just start with one. This is from someone in the audience. They said, how does it differ than other solutions on the market? And what goes in? I guess we can talk about this with regards to, okay, there's a few more that are coming in too now. So with this one, how does it differ than other solutions on the market, I suppose, in a similar category? And then I guess what went into your product innovation process while bringing this new one to market? That's the first question I have.
That's all you, Doug.
Yeah, so I can mention that. So these type of product, you're right. There are some of these type of product out there, but what sets us apart from others is that it's really in the formulation, right? So we formulated the product so that have the right surfactants and the right emulsifier and the spreader. So then, and when you apply that product to the target for your target pest or your disease, it's really effective. So the way I like to explain it is that yes, you can have an active ingredient. Think about, like, for example, aspirin, right, as a medicine, and the active ingredient in aspirin. But if you just take that active ingredient, it's not going to be effective, right? That active ingredient, it has to be formulated in the drug world. They formulate it with the product, all the other product called excipients. So when it goes into your body, it targets the site where it needs to go. So same thing for Hygro Punch. We formulate it so that the product is stable, and the product, once you apply it, it gets a nice even spread coverage of your surface on the plants as well.
I would say the other difference as well, or the thing that makes our product stand out, and we were going to dive into this a little bit further, but since it's gotten brought up, it's the results as well. We have really strong data and really strong results on this product that we've gotten from third-party lab tests. A lot of these were performed blind as well.
Yep.
And we've seen up to 98% reduction on spider mite counts on cannabis. And we have one on powdery mildew as well that was reduced up to 85%. So really, like, us as a company, we're very research based and we're very science based. And yes, there's a lot of products out there. We know firsthand and we have the data on how well ours works.
Yeah, and now, as Leanne mentioned, these are blinded study and done by third-party trial on the this particular one in spider mite, and the next one that we have is on powdery mildew. In fact, we actually work with the University Extension. Some of you out there may know him. He's well known in the cannabis industry, Dr. Zamir Panja. So we work with his group to help us actually to identify this, and also his lab was the one that actually tests this for us as well too.
I have a few more questions that are coming in. I'm gonna just go. Kelly just posted one in the chat. Hey Kelly, thanks for your question. They said, have you been able to identify any pistil burning when punch is used in the late flower ripening stage? Does micron size matter during application, fog versus foliar spray? So
we generally recommend generally recommend apply only up to about the third week or so of flower. We generally don't recommend to apply after that. And it's on our website as well too. And we generally recommend once if you apply during the flower stage up to the third week, we generally recommend you stay with a dose of 1%.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing, thank you. And then I have a few more questions. If we could just go back to the test results just for a second. And then another question I have is, let's talk about incorporating clone intake protocol. Does HygroPunch offer any solutions for mites, spiders, and thrips, and aphids, leaf, and root? I think you just discussed that on the last slide, but let's just refresh that really quickly.
I think it's the second, the one next to last one, the one you have the product.
Sir, can you just repeat the question, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about incorporating a quote-unquote clone intake protocol. Does HygroPunch offer any solutions for mites, spiders and thrips, and aphids, leaf and root?
Yeah, absolutely. We have test results specifically on aphids, mites, specifically on the leaves, but we are in the process of testing it as a drench application as well.
And actually, I can mention about the thrips. We have some grower tested on thrips for drench, and it works quite well. And the recommendation is stick to around 1% for the drench, and it works quite well. So what that grower did was basically, because when you get thrips, it's going to be in the media as well as the adult in the leaf. So they just did like a rotation between foliar and drench, right? Yeah. So you kind of get the best of both worlds.
So yeah, this would definitely be a good option if I'm understanding the clone intake program correctly. This would definitely be a good option. You're bringing in your clones, you're giving it like a low percentage spray, probably. Yeah. Keep those clones safe, use that preventative dose, and prevent anything from upcoming or get rid of anything that they might have come in with.
Amazing. And then I have one last question. This is from Liam. He says, "Hey guys, does this product have any have SLS / isopropyl, or is it only oils?"
No, none of those two components. Yeah, it's in fact, it's hard to see here, but if you have a sample, you can read the label. All the ingredients is disclosed on the label. It does not have alcohol or SLS.
Awesome. I think that is all that I have for questions in the chat right now. So really quickly before we sign off here, everyone, thanks for everyone for joining. We had quite a few people in the audience this time, so really happy that everyone's here. Just want to make a quick note. You can trial Hydro Punch and a portfolio of products from Hygrozyme in Grow World. So I'll post at the bottom of this link. It seems like there are some issues with the circle chat right now, but I will send a message to everyone that is attended today with where you can trial if you are interested in Hydro Punch or any of the other Hygrozyme products. These are fantastic products. The test results do not lie. And that's why they are shared on screen with us today. So if you want to trial them, or if you have any other questions for Leanne or Doug, feel free to shoot Leanne a message. I think Leanne, you are in the community, so if you can route anything that's more technical to anyone else on your team. But feel free to ask any more questions because they are here in the community. Their products are here for you. Guys, this has been an amazing presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
you to everyone who's joining. I can't see everybody, but I heard a lot of names that I recognize. So thank you sincerely for everyone that showed up.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. We're signing off now. Take care.
Take care.